Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Facebook Live today. My name is Esther, and I'll be your host today. We have a fantastic session lined up for you. Very, very exciting. We have with us Dawn Milne of Stories Behind the Stars. And before I get into that, I just want to let you know about a few things that we have going on at MyHeritage. We have just announced a Valentine's Day competition today, hot off the presses, a very exciting competition called Love in Full Color. And what we're asking is for all of you to share wedding photos that you have in your family. You might have your own wedding photos, your parents, your grandparents, any of your relatives that you have. They might be in black and white, or they may be in color. If they're in black and white, we're asking you to colorize them using MyHeritage in color. If they're maybe they're in color and they're faded, they're from, I don't know, the 80s, even from the 90s, and maybe in not such great shape. And if you restore them using our new tool, that'll also make them look as if they were taken yesterday. So we're asking you to colorize, enhance, or restore them on MyHeritage, and to share them with us on social media using the hashtag #LoveInFullColor. And we'll be choosing 3 lucky winners at the end of this competition. And so go dig up those old family wedding photos. And I'm sure you have some old wedding photos from family members. And we'd love to see them in color. If they were in black and white, or restored if they were already in color, and enhanced. So using the MyHeritage photo tools on these photos, you'll really be able to bring them to life and to add some new life and focus to them. So we'll be sharing a link to the competition in the comments section. And this is a very, very exciting Valentine's Day competition that we have going on here. For today's show, at the end of today's show, we'll be having a giveaway. We'll be giving away one MyHeritage Complete plan. That's the best plan that we have to offer at MyHeritage, with unlimited access to 13 billion historical records, unlimited family tree size, and free and unlimited use of the MyHeritage photo tools that I just mentioned. That's MyHeritage in color with the restoration feature, and the MyHeritage photo enhancer. So a fantastic giveaway for today. To enter, since we'll be talking about the World War II fallen soldiers, to enter, please tell us about your family members that served in World War II. Let us know if you discovered something about them on MyHeritage, or just maybe the story about them. We'd love to hear that, to help remember and commemorate them. So please leave that in the comment section, and one lucky winner will receive a MyHeritage Complete plan today. So that is our giveaway. I see some comments here about people having to go early or not being able to watch the full show. So just to let you know, as always, our MyHeritage Facebook Lives, they are recorded, and they're available on the MyHeritage Facebook page. That's facebook.com/MyHeritage under the video section. So after today, you'll be able to watch today's session. And also you can watch any of our previous sessions. We've been doing Facebook Lives twice a week. We have some fantastic content up on our Facebook page, and a lot of really great content coming up as well. We recently posted a list of all of our upcoming sessions for February, so you'll want to check that out, and we hope to see you all at many of those upcoming sessions. So today's guest, Dawn Milne, grew up in Colorado. He developed a lifelong interest in history at a very early age. He raised his family in Utah while engaging in a banking career for 38 years. What started in 2016 as a 4-year lunchtime blog hobby to write stories of Americans who did not come home from World War II has turned into the nonprofit initiative Stories Behind the Stars that he started in 2020. It has attracted nearly 900 people from all 50 states and 13 other countries to help out. Don and his wife recently moved to Louisville, Kentucky to be closer to more of their 13 grandchildren. And it's my pleasure to invite him onto our show and introduce him to all of you today. So let's give a warm welcome to Don. Hello.
Hi. Thanks for inviting me,
Welcome.
Esther. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
for joining us.
And thanks to MyHeritage for hosting this. And it's a wonderful website. I've used it somewhat, and I'm finding some pictures that I hadn't seen because someone else put them there from farther back in your family. These other people are posting pictures, and it's awesome to see stuff I was not aware of. So it's way cool. And that colorized thing, I'm gonna have to check that out because both my wife's parents and my parents, their wedding pictures are black and white. So it'd be kind of interesting to see how they look colorized. So that's a cool, fun thing that people can
Yeah.
use.
So after today's session, you'll have to send them over to us so we can see them.
Okay, I'll check it out. Thank you.
Okay, great. So today's show, we'd love to hear more about your initiative and how we can all help out.
Okay. Yeah, I created a slide deck. If you want to bring that up, then I'll go through those and
Sure. Yeah,
explain.
let's do that. You just have to, I think the slides aren't up there.
Okay.
There we go. We just have to be in presenter mode. Okay, perfect. We see them now.
Okay, so the name of my nonprofit initiative is Stories Behind the Stars, and our way we would like to have people consider what we're doing is we have the catchphrase, remembering all the U.S. World War II fallen. And the mission that we have is we want to tell the stories of all 400,000 U.S. World War II fallen, create stories for each and every one of them. The actual number is a little bit up in the air. There was never an official tally after the war of exactly how many there were. It's probably between 4,500 and 4,415,000, so somewhere in that range. But all these people that served in the war made the ultimate sacrifice and didn't come home. And we want to make sure all of them have a story. Right after the war, or even for most of the first 50 decades after the war, it really wasn't possible for that to happen. But with sites like MyHeritage and others, it's now possible to find the information to tell their stories. A little bit of background about me. That's me there in the Superman outfit. I guess before they found whoever's the most recent Superman, or even Adam West. In the olden days, I was Superman, and there's my kid brother Batman. When I wasn't doing superhero feats, one of my interests, very young age, was reading biographies written for kids, obviously, and I really enjoyed reading like the Wright brothers and George Washington and Abraham Lincoln, and I was much more fascinated by these biographies than I was by fiction books. And then my dad, when I was 10 years old, he took me to go see the movie Patton, and that was really intriguing because I never heard of that guy. Because how many 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds are going to know about a World War II general? So that really got me interested. And when I was watching the movie, I saw that one of the trailers said that it was based on the book A Soldier's Story by Omar Bradley. So I went to the library, a 10-year-old kid, and it wasn't in the kids section. I had to go in this other section where the grown-up books were in the biography section, and I checked it out. It's like 300 or 400 pages, I think maybe more than 400 pages, and I read it as a 10-year-old. And after that, I didn't really go back to the kids section because I realized, wow, all the good books are in the grown-up section. For most of the last 50 years, and I've really been interested in reading history. I'm not always reading World War II books, but that's one of the areas I'm interested in. And you can only read so many books about Churchill or MacArthur or FDR, and eventually you're going to read the books about the people that were actually there when they're in their teens or early 20s, and they came home and they wrote memoirs. And one of my favorite memoirs from that era was by William Manchester, and he served in the Marines in the Pacific, and some of the people he wrote about didn't come home, and he still remembers who they were. The other photo on this page is President Eisenhower. 20 years after D-Day, he went back with Walter Cronkite, and they filmed a special for TV, and you can still find that on YouTube. And the way they ended that was in the cemetery there in Normandy, because they were remembering these are the people that made it possible for the world that we live in right now. And they don't get to experience everything that we've been able to enjoy, but they should be remembered. And in the 1960s, it wasn't possible to do what we can in 2020. So what I ended up doing in right after D-Day, or not after D-Day, right after Pearl Harbor Day in 2016, the 75th anniversary, of that event. They were doing a lot of news stories about let's remember D-Day, and we've got still some of our survivors that are there. They're now in their 90s, but we want to honor them. And I think it's great that the news takes the time to do that. But I also, from all the memoirs that I had read, I'd say, it's not those survivors that we really need to be thanking, and they would be the first ones to say this. It's going to be those that didn't make it home. Those are the ones we should be remembering. So I realized that in the year 2016, it was probably possible that you could go online with just a name and maybe a birth date, just start doing some searches, places like MyHeritage and elsewhere, and you can find detailed information enough to write a short story about anyone who died during World War II. So just as a hobby, because my kids are older and my golf game is terrible, my golf score looks like a bowling score, I decided on my lunch break at work, I was a banker at the time, I'm just going to research and write a story. So within a period of less than an hour, I'd write up a story about one person who didn't make it home. And I did that from December 7th of 2016 through September 2nd of last year. And that was my plan. I was just going to end at that point. At that point, there would have been 1,371 stories. And eventually that Blogspot blog ended up with 1.5 million views. So there's an audience for stories like this. So when I was getting towards the last year of my blog, people were realizing that I wasn't going to be doing this anymore when I was done. And they thought, well, you should still do this. And so I ended up, my position at the bank I was at was being eliminated. And so I thought, well, I might have some free time here. If I'm looking for a job, I'm going to see if I can maybe start something up so that we're not just telling one story a day, but maybe it's possible to do more than that. So I wanted to build this project around the theme of the Gold Star. In World War II, and it happened actually in eras before then, but in World War II, when someone passed away in the service of their country, their family would get what was called the Gold Star service flag that they could hang in their window. And also, if you've ever gone to Washington, D.C. and you visited the World War II Memorial, the Freedom Wall has 4,048 gold stars. And each one of these gold stars represents 100 of these fallen from World War II. So my idea is, let's give each of these stars, each of these heroes, a story. And so I'm just going to share a few of these just as examples of why I think it's important that we share these stories. So when I was researching these people, all I had was a name. I knew nothing more about them except that they died in World War II. So for example, Sergeant Frank Winterling, he joined the Marines a couple days after Pearl Harbor. He did that because his brother was already in the Marines. His brother was actually in the Philippines, and he was captured by the Japanese. He ended up in Guadalcanal, and one night there were some Japanese battleships that were shelling the island, and he was one of those that was killed. His brother died in captivity a little while later. And the really touching part of this particular story is their father, who just lost both his sons, instead of being bitter about what had happened to these children of his who were fighting for his country, he joined the Marines. I don't know if you can do this nowadays, but I guess back in the 1940s, they would let a 54-year-old join the Marines. So they didn't let him go overseas, but he served as a guard at a installation in North Carolina during the war. So again, I didn't know anything about this person but a name when I started researching this story. Lieutenant Harold Barnett, he was a B-17 pilot. He was also in the Pacific. He was shot down by Japanese fighter planes in June of 1943. An interesting thing I learned is that his wife never remarried. So there must have been something special about their relationship that more than 6 years later, when she died, she chose to want to just be his wife and not get remarried. Lieutenant Jack Wiles, he was killed on D-Day, June 6th of 1944. So I think in the news here in the United States, you can usually count on hearing some stories around the anniversary of Pearl Harbor and maybe the day the bomb was dropped, and also D-Day. And so a lot of people know about that, but do we know much about the actual men who paid the price on that day? I'd have to say I really didn't until I got involved in this project. And here's just an example of one of these men. He was actually in the Navy. His ship was sunk during the invasion. And when I was doing research about him, I found something online where even 58 years later, his girlfriend left a note for him, says, "I shall always remember your bright smile." And one last person here that's one of these stories that I think is worth remembering is Private Omer LeMay. So he died of wounds in Okinawa on 21st of June 1945. So if you're a World War II buff and you know anything about the Battle of Okinawa, that's the last week of the battle. So this young Marine, he was probably one of the last 100 Americans, last 100 Marines at least, who died during World War II. And sadly, his younger brother, following his older brother's example of serving his country, he died in the Korean War, and they're now both buried side by side. So I ended up creating this nonprofit initiative. It's called Stories Behind the Stars. And what we're doing is we're going from just this one man to hundreds at this point, and I'm hoping there'll be thousands. It's getting some great news coverage nationwide. I was interviewed by Fox News' Martha McCallum in December and regularly get attention from newspapers and TV stations, radio. I think it's because as a country, we really have a love for these people, and we're getting to the point where those few remaining World War II veterans won't be here that much longer. You just, once you're past 100, you don't buy the green bananas, as they say. So we need to have a way to remember the people that they thought were the most important. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do with this project. So we really have a twofold goal. We want that there be a story for every one of these 400,000 plus U.S. World War II fallen. And the second thing, I think this is what motivates a lot of our writers to participate, is we want it to be possible so that each story can be read by scanning a name from a gravestone. So we're actually having this app in development right now. And the way this will work is when this app is on your phone, you just take it to any gravesite, any memorial that has someone that served in World War II. You just scan the name. You don't even have to type it because the smartphone camera is smart enough to recognize the characters. And once it does that, it knows what cemetery you're in. It takes you to a link to that story that our writers have written. And you can read it right there. So especially if you've ever been to National Cemetery, you can see row and row after row of these young men and a few young women who died in World War II. And how many of us have sometimes thought, I wonder what his story is? And all we have is just a name and a date, and we can kind of guess from the date maybe where he was at. But now it's going to be possible. It's like all of our cemeteries are going to be turned into museums. So how are you going to write 400,000 stories? Well, I did the calculation. You have one person writing one story a day, and that person can do it if they took 1,095 years, or if you just had a couple thousand people, if they were just writing one story a week, that could be done in 56 months. And the reason I picked the number 56 months is that's how many months it'll be from now until September of 2025. And that's going to be the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II. So I think I'm pretty realistic that we can get all these stories written in that time frame. And I'm probably even too cautious. It'll probably be done faster than that. But I think it'd be really cool that we can report back to those remaining World War II vets. And there'll still be some in 2025, though at that point they're probably all going to be 100 or more. But let them know that every one of their buddies that they left behind is going to be remembered with the story. It be read at their gravesite. So we have volunteers that come in all ages, that come in all backgrounds. A little bit of detail on what we've done so far in 2020 as we started. We did a pilot project in Utah. Utah had 2,100 people who died in World War II. And thanks to the help of 150 volunteers, every one of those stories has been completed. So one stayed down, 49 to go, right? We have an individual in Alabama that's doing it for that state. There's 7,000 fallen there, and they don't have quite as many people working there yet, and they didn't start quite as early as the Utah group, but they're making progress every day, and as more people join, we're getting more stories written. And I have a woman in Michigan that's interested in doing something there, and there's going to be 18,000 we'll have to do in Michigan. We're doing a special project that just started in January. There were 2,502 Americans who died in Normandy right on D-Day itself. At this point, I've got 70 plus volunteers and more joining daily that are helping to write these stories. And even though it's just been something we've been doing for less than a month, already more than 500 of these stories are accounted for. So for sure, we're going to have these done by the 77th anniversary of D-Day this coming June. And I think it'll be super cool at some point in the future when any of you have visited the Normandy American Museum there, not museum, the Normandy American Cemetery and Memorial. It'll be so cool, and you'll be able to just go down the rows, and each name you want to stop at, you can scan their name and read their story. So to make it possible, we know not everyone's a natural writer, but it doesn't really take that much skill to write an obituary length article. We're talking maybe 800 words on average. I created an online course, a free online course. We're calling it StarCorps Bootcamp. And we can train our volunteers to write these stories. And we'll show you all the great resources and where to find stuff like MyHeritage, newspapers, etc. Because the information is pretty much all out there. Our volunteers will tell you, just give me a name and a date, maybe a service number, and let them loose, and they'll find a great story about each of these people. Sometimes less, sometimes a whole lot more. So I guess the call to action here is less Joe Exotic and more G.I. Joe. It takes about 2 hours to research and write a story. So in other words, if you're looking for something to do on the weekend, you can see what's on Netflix, or you can say, maybe I'll get on MyHeritage, find some information about somebody that served in World War II and write their story. Let me go back a page. Some of our fallen heroes are make-believe, but some of our fallen heroes are real. So society today, we just love our heroes, right? But oftentimes we've turned them into imaginary make-believe heroes like the Marvel heroes. Everybody knows that Tony Stark, Iron Man, died. But how many of us know the real heroes that are fallen? I think we can make a dent in that and find out who they were and share these stories. And so what we're really going to end up with is we're going to have 400,000 stories, each of them. Anyone visiting a memorial or a cemetery can scan that. The story will be right there for a long time into the future. And it's something that anybody visiting a cemetery will be able to use. I'm kind of reminded of a movie that I saw back in the late 1980s called Field of Dreams. So if you're not familiar with that movie, it's about this individual who's a farmer in Iowa, and he's got some cornfields out there, and he has this voice come to his head, and the voice says, if you build it, they will come. And he sees this vision in the corner of his cornfield of this baseball field. So he ends up tearing out a big corner of his field, of his cornfield, and he builds this baseball diamond out in the middle of Iowa, not really a place where you'd expect to see something like this. And everyone thinks he's crazy, and the bank says, well, you might lose your farm because all the money you spent doing this, and that doesn't make you anything. But he just had a reason he think he had to do this. And in the movie, out of the cornfields come these baseball players from the 1920s. And they just wanted a place to play baseball to relive what they had. And in a way, that's kind of what's happened in this situation. I'm just this one guy in a cornfield, minding my own business as a banker, and then I leave my banking career and ended up starting this on a whim. I was able to do everything I did in 2020 because I had a good severance that got me through last year. And I've had all these hundreds of people that have joined me to help tell these stories. And now we've had thousands of stories that have already been written. And it's like these World War II heroes are coming out of the cornfield, and their stories are right there for everyone to read. So I'm hoping that some of you will help me build this, and then we can get more of these heroes to come, and we'll have their stories for the future. I want to give a special thanks to MyHeritage for hosting me in this Facebook Live. And also, you should know that they've been giving me some financial support for my nonprofit initiative. As I said, my severance ran out, so they're making it possible for me to pay the bills now. So that's very generous that they're doing that. My website is storiesbehindthestars.org. You can visit there to learn more. And you can also email me at don@storiesbehindthestars.org if you have any questions you want to ask. And I'm also, as part of the neat thing about Facebook Live, is you can do questions right now. So I'll go ahead and turn the time back over to Esther at this point. If she wants to get through any questions, I'd be happy to answer them now.
Yeah, that would be great. And thank you so much for giving us that walkthrough of this important initiative. And I love the comparison to the superheroes, especially as you started off your talk with the photo of yourself dressed up, you and your brother dressed up as superheroes. So very, very fitting. And it's so true. We really do have the chance to remember these heroes that otherwise will be forgotten. So it's really so important, and a cause that we at MyHeritage truly believe in. So we're very excited about supporting it, and also helping to find volunteers who would like to donate their time and join the cause and write up these important stories, as Don mentioned. So we'll take some questions now. I saw a few in the audience for you, Don. So the first one is from Lori, and Lori asks, will this app be able to be used in cemeteries in France, Belgium, etc., on the gravestones?
Absolutely. Yeah, the way the app works is we start with the names carved in stone, and the apps can read the name, so it collects the other information, and then it knows where you're at. So as long as your GPS is on your phone, it knows you're in that location. And we have software that tells us the GPS locations of each cemetery. We know from the back end where each of these men are buried. So we've already got the story lined up and matched up to that cemetery. So as soon as we know you're in that cemetery, that's how we're able to match up the story. So we don't need to have like tags of any kind. At some point, people are saying, well, if you put a QR tag on every gravesite, you don't have to do that. It works automatically as long as the story is in the system, and as long as the gravesite is in the system. And almost all the gravesite where these World War II heroes are buried are already, we have the GPS already. So super easy and super exciting.
Definitely a time where technology can help us and make this information just so accessible for all of us. Incredible. We have a question here from Sherry, and Sherry asks, what happens if the person we are looking for lied to get into the Army? Even with a search plus or minus more or less of the years, is not getting any hits. So I guess they lied on all their documentation, and then it's not possible to find them. Do you have any advice in a case like this?
I guess the first thing you'd want to look for is, do they have a service number? So if they got in the Army and they served, they have a service number somewhere. So if you know what that number is, that's going to be your key to finding information about them. What they often joke, you're just a number in the Army, and to some extent that's true. And as long as we know your service number, in World War II they had different ones prior to when you're in. If you're an enlisted man, it's a certain sequence. If you're an officer, it's a different sequence. So I would recommend starting and see if you can get a service number. And there's a form called the DD-214 that you can order. Right now, the federal agency that does that is closed because of COVID. But if you have the information, maybe able to try to send that in. If they're passed away, you should be able to get the information that way. So that's the path I would recommend.
Okay, we have a question here from Anna, who asks, when the records were destroyed in the fire, is there a way to find a list of medals and awards the service member received?
Sometimes yes, and sometimes no. There's other records you can find too. Sometimes it would have been mentioned in the original battalion level documentation, so you can find that, because that's when it would have been recommended for the medals. There's a website, I think it's called valortimes.com. If you end up going through the boot camp, we have a whole page on medals that explains how to research those. So there are other ways you can find that information. The questioner is referring to a fire that happened in St. Louis, where a bunch of the military records were lost in the late 1960s. And that's true to a large extent, but uh, for the purpose of writing these stories, even if we don't have that information, um, we can find enough from other locations that you can write enough for the synopsis. For our purpose on Stories Behind the Stars, we're not trying to write a multi-chapter biography about each of these people. It's basically just 800-word length obituaries what we're looking for. When you think about our audience, are people reading stuff at a gravesite. So you want to be able to go through something and get by in 5, maybe 10 minutes the most. You don't want to be at a gravesite and you're scrolling and scrolling and scrolling on your phone and you're there 2 hours later. So there's a place for that too. But for this particular project, we're just getting that snapshot to just get that basic information that gets you started. And the cool thing about how this project works is there's no one official story of Stories Behind the Stars. If you have more information and you want to add another story, totally easy and totally available to do that. I just got an email yesterday from an individual that he realized that someone had already written a story about his uncle who shares his name. He was named after his uncle who was a flyer in World War II who died. And he says, oh, I feel bad. The story's already been written and I was named after him and I got a lot of good information. And so I emailed him back and said, that's wonderful. Let's add another story. It's kind of like when you visit a gravesite, there's no rule that says if there's a flower at that gravesite, you can't leave another one. Leave another one. So these are like, each story is kind of like a bouquet of flowers that we're leaving for these people. So the more the merrier.
I love that analogy, the flowers. That's really beautiful. And that's exactly what it is. Every time a story is written for them, it's just leaving something in their memory. So nice. I see a couple comments here. Lori says, this is something that should be done for Canadians. I think this is pretty awesome. It's a fabulous way to remember those who came before us. And also from Jeanette, who said, how would you recommend starting doing this for the UK? So I guess my question for you, Don, is do you have plans to go further once you have reached this goal of all 400,000 plus US World War II fallen?
Well, there's two parts to that. The part with the app isn't just going to work with people from World War II. It's just that's where we're populating the information. And so it's like it's like the chicken and the egg. You got to have something in order for the app to work. You have to have a population to work off of. So we need to have this base of 400,000 names so that when you try to use the app, it actually gets you there. I've seen some similar apps where you go and you're interested to find out stuff and you type something in, there's no details there. So they built the app, but there's no content. So we're starting with these 400,000 names, and basically the app's going to work with any grave anywhere as long as they've got a military story. So it won't just be Americans. If it's World War II, it can be any other country. It can be Korea, it can be Vietnam, it can be the Civil War, it can be the Revolutionary War. You just scan that name, and if that story is in the database, it's going to get pulled up and you're going to be able to read it. So that's the one part of the answer for the app. The app will work with anybody, regardless of what country they're at. The other pieces, as far as our focus being American World War II, that's what this project is working on, but there's nothing that's going to prevent people working on Canadian names using the same tools that we have. To some extent, the record's going to be a little bit different for each army, but I've got people from 13 countries that are helping out, and some of them are working with people like from Canadian ancestry that ended up in the United States. But you can use the same concept and do it for Canada. The individual that is working on Alabama, he started working on me earlier than most people, but he realized this needs to be done. I'm going to just do it. So it's kind of a big step. But if you want to build that baseball diamond in Canada, you'll find more people that are going to help you write those Canadian names. I can guarantee that. Same thing for UK. I'm really grateful. The last few days, I've had a number of people from France, a lot of them from the Normandy region, that have a great love for the Americans because they were the first province in France that was freed, and they're writing stories. They've been writing stories there in France for the people that are buried there. And they had a place they could put it on their own website, but now they've got a place that's going to be internationally available for everyone. So this can be an international project. It's just what I've been focusing on, but I guess another way I can look at this is, in the olden days, if you're traveling somewhere, you had suitcase, and we've had wheels for like centuries, right? So why is it only within the last 40 years or so that we decided to put wheels on suitcases? So I'm basically putting wheels on suitcases here in America for this project. And if someone wants to do it somewhere else, super easy. And I would love to hear how they're progressing in doing that.
We have a comment here from Francisco who says, "Thank you very much for allowing us to remember the heroes who gave their lives for freedom, equality, and fraternity." And I think that's what we're all feeling here. So appreciative of what you're doing here in this project. So really, really fantastic. I see that there's a bunch more questions, I think. Let's see, I just had a question that I wanted to ask you, Don, which was, what was the most interesting story that you've read about a soldier? The most interesting or different thing that you learned over, because I'm sure you've read so many of these stories that have been collected. Do you have
I'll make it easy for people, and it's actually one of the stories you can find on the website, storiesbehindthestars.org. It's about an individual by Wallace Zosel, and he wrote a story to his unborn son, knowing that he might not make it home from World War II, and he actually died 8 days after his son was born. He may not have even known that his son was born at the time. So his wife got this letter, and I've saved the letter as part of the story. And he was only 24 at the time when he wrote this letter, but the wisdom that he has, I cannot read that story out loud without crying, because it's so touching on what he kind of saw the future of what America could be. And he wanted his son to grow up in this wonderful country and embrace the values. And he recognized, he says, America is not a perfect country. We have a lot we need to grow and do better at. He says, but we're basically paying the price for you to be able to do that. So please earn this.
Wow. Well, you're definitely doing your part to make the country a better place, and we are all very appreciative. So thank you so much, John. And can you just tell everyone again how they can get involved if they'd like to volunteer? We'll put the link as well, but just tell everyone what the process is, how they can join.
Well, our website is storiesbehindthestars.org. And when you go there, the main thing we're looking for is for people to volunteer. And when you volunteer, we are asking you to give of your time. We don't ask you for any money related to working on this. Everything that we provide is free to help you do your research. So that's what we're basically looking for people to volunteer. Some people volunteer because they want to do one story, because they have maybe a grandfather or a great uncle that was in the war, and so they want their story told, and that's fine. And we have other people on the other extreme that they said, I've been locked in my house for COVID for months and months, and I'm just going crazy. I want something to do. And so there's a number of volunteers that on a daily basis, they're cranking out multiple stories, and that's great for them. So they can do that. If people want to email me, my email is don@storiesbehindthestars.org. So I do get quite a bit of email these days, so might not be able to respond to you the same day you write me, but I will get to you eventually.
Okay, great. I see somebody saying, please fill out the website. So don't worry, we'll put the link right there in the comment section, and you'll be able to visit and to volunteer as well. And now we're just going to give away the MyHeritage Complete plan to one lucky winner. Thank you for all the stories that have been shared here in the comment section. Some really, really nice stories of those who fought in your families, and we really appreciate you all sharing them with us. And if you have time, I suggest you all go back and read some of these stories, because they're just so touching. And the winner of today's complete plan for sharing her story with us is Kimberly Marie Booth. And Kimberly shared with us, she wrote, while researching my family tree and getting to know my father's family history, I found out my great uncle was killed in action in Burma with Merrill's Marauders. Another great uncle died in England in World War II. My grandfather and my father-in-law both survived World War II. And Kimberly, it's just so nice when you're researching your family history and you find out all this information about your ancestors. So that's just lovely. And we'll be in touch with you through private message to claim your prize. So congratulations, Kimberly. And Don, we just want to say thank you again for joining us today and giving us such a clear presentation of what you're setting out to do. And we hope that a lot of MyHeritage users will take it upon themselves to join in your mission and help out.
All welcome.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you everyone for joining us, and we hope that you have a great day today.
Bye-bye.
Bye.